Well, let's talk live then to our correspondent Gulliver Cragg, who joins us from Kyiv. Gulliver, more details then emerging of what was discussed at the Trump-Zelensky meeting at the end of last week. That's seeming to tie in with those new comments there from Donald Trump.
Yes, Donald Trump has now been saying that he did not pressure Volodymyr Zelensky to give up the remaining parts of Donetsk region. They're in Ukrainian hands, but the previous reports suggesting that he did try to persuade the Ukrainian president to do that after Vladimir Putin was insisting that that's what he wanted seemed pretty credible. We also heard that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, was again talking about the fact that the Donbas region is majority Russian speaking, as if that should be a reason why it should be handed over to Russia, clearly either willfully ignoring or still totally ignorant of what kind of a country Ukraine is, and that there are countless other regions that are majority Russian speaking, including Zelensky's hometown of Kryvyi Rih. But it sounds as though Zelensky clearly refused to do that, and the Trump administration has already heard the Ukrainian arguments and I think understands them to some degree. And so that's why Trump afterwards came out with this idea of freezing the front lines where they currently are and denied that he ever tried to persuade Zelensky of anything other than that. It's all not a very good outcome for the Ukrainians, but their position remains unchanged, that they are very happy to agree to a ceasefire with the front lines where they currently are and negotiate after that. But from what we know of Vladimir Putin's negotiating position, there's been no indication that it's changed. Those negotiations will be very difficult indeed, because it doesn't look like there is any reconciliation between the two sides' positions that is possible.
Gulliver, you were actually in the Donbas region just yourself last week. How would people there feel about Donald Trump's suggestions?
Well, there are all kinds of different people in the Donbas region, of course. There are still some people who were pro-Russian before the war and still are, who believe Russian propaganda. They're clearly a minority. A much bigger cohort of the population was perhaps pro-Russian or culturally sympathetic to Russia before the war, is now horrified by what Russia has been doing, but has not become strongly patriotically pro-Ukrainian either. And what they all say that they want is just for the war to end. And faced with the tough choice of their home being occupied by Russia or their home being completely destroyed, they might choose being occupied by Russia. But most of the people I spoke to are in a different category. They're the people who have either already were or have become staunchly pro-Ukrainian, active sections of the population who are promoting Ukrainian culture and absolutely cannot countenance the idea of their towns and cities being taken over by Russia. They'd have to leave if that happened. Now, whether or not they would say, well, let's agree to cut our losses and freeze the conflict where it is now, if losing the part of Donbas that Ukraine has already lost means that it can keep the part of Donbas that it still holds, well, maybe some of them would think that that would be the least worst option. But the problem is, would it work? And that is the big question mark. And that's the reason why Ukraine is agreeing to a ceasefire only if it gets security guarantees, because people don't think Vladimir Putin has abandoned his ambition to take over the whole of Ukraine. Actually, Zelensky said as much very clearly in a briefing with journalists yesterday.